Hello, it's Dane. I'm back. I've got some time to kill. It seems like cameras are pretty quiet today. There's not much going on. So, yeah, let's do this before anything unusual happens.
Alright, so in my experience, racist is one of the most triggering words for white people.
Triggering isn't the right description. If you think back over the last 70 years, every person in America has been taught that racism is a very bad thing, and being called a racist is also a very bad thing. Alleging someone is racist is legally considered defamation of character. No one wants to bear the stigma of being called a racist, and most people will automatically rebuke it. This is a similar reaction to when someone is called rapist, whether or not it's true. Society has ingrained in our minds that these two things are evil, and to be one of them is evil. Both cause a strong social reaction.
But are all white people racist?
No, of course not. Why would you even ask that question?
Let me explain using science.
I've got a problem with this. Why not say, allow me to explain why I think this way? I do hope that you'll have some sort of citation and refer to actual studies.
Short answer, no.
Cool, that was quick. I thought you were going to be
long answer, yes, of course.
God damn it. When the opening argument is, yes, of course all white people are racist, then the standard for proving this is monumental. This is a bold, wild assertion. We don't know what your definitions are, so how is it fair for viewers to look at this objectively instead of instantly hitting the dislike button? This is why people hate clickbait. They don't like being lied to.
A racist is defined as someone who feels discrimination or prejudice to people of a different race, or feels that one race is superior to another.
You're partially right, but you've tacked on an addition to that definition. A simpler, clearer definition is someone who has a hatred or intolerance of another race or races. Tacking on racial superiority isn't fair in this case because that is a separate but related concept. Asserting that all white people are racist and then defining racism as socially reprehensible gives you little room to work with. You figuratively painted yourself into a corner. Now, you either have to press on with this train of thought or change your definition. This is what's called moving the goalposts.
You're probably already like, oh my god, but that's not me. Hold the fuck on, I'm not done.
Well, what did you expect when you declare that all white people are evil and morally reprehensible? You've slandered them all and equated them with being neo-Nazis and KKK members. Of course people are going to be annoyed. What if I said that all people who wear straight-billed hats are pie eaters, and then define pie eater as one who murders children in their sleep? You'd be pretty mad too. Or perplexed.
A lot of people are probably focused on the latter part of that definition, perceived racial superiority. But this behavioral neuroscientist is focused on the word prejudice. That word is the centerpiece by which the rest of this definition can exist.
Well, considering perceived racial superiority is a tacked-on part of that definition, then sure, whatever, we'll ignore that. That's not the important part. But you sure hyped it in your example clip. Let's look at using prejudice as the sole linchpin of the definition. You also didn't use the definition in full. It's actually a person who shows or feels discrimination or prejudice against people of other races, or who believes that a particular race is superior to another. Now, this just may be me, but it looks like you're moving the goalposts. Instead of white people being racist, it's actually white people are prejudiced. This is redefining your terms, and it's actually quite aggravating.
Fun fact, humans do have a tendency to create in-groups and out-groups, but they aren't born with prejudice. That's something that we learn. It's a product of nurture, not nature.
Alright, so we agree that all humans have in-groups and out-groups. This is standard psychology.
What that means is that we learn it from the people we're around, the people that we're raised by, also known as social contact.
Yes, you're correct. Social contact influences how children learn and behave, and attitudes around them rub off on one another.
Social contact to different people has been proven scientifically to improve cognitive development and cultural understanding overall.
Yes, again, you're correct. This is why cultural appropriation is such a loaded, useless term. Humans do better when they experience a gamut of cultures and differences. It's why children need to play together and be introduced to different groups of peers, not segregated from one another.
Inside prejudice is bias, or the inclination to have certain opinions based on your personal experiences. Whether you think that Drake and J-Lo go well together, or that the 1996 motion picture Space Jam is the best movie of all time, it is.
Space Jam is mediocre. As for your argument, bias leads to prejudice, prejudice leads to racism, racism leads to hatred, and hatred leads to the dark side. Bias is not prejudice, though. To conflate the two is a mistake. You've already stated that the neuroscientist is focused on prejudice, not bias. So, which is it?
We all have biases.
Yes, we all have biases. It's something that can't be helped. What we choose to do with our biases, though, is up to us.
And those biases align themselves to positive and negative emotions, like, wow, I love this, or I hate this. These opinions are based on a multitude of things. For instance, the media, stereotypes, and being around people from different walks of life. I'll say it again for those of y'all in the back. We all have racial biases.
Okay, here's the deal. You've abandoned the argument, all white people are racist, and replaced it with, we all have racial biases. Those are two completely different claims, with two completely different standards of proof. This is intellectual dishonesty, and it's where I get a little bit annoyed. It's been disguised in the jokes and the few objectively true statements, but it's here. You've used double meanings and discarded them up until this point.
So, is having racial bias the exact same thing as being racist? In my opinion, nah. Racism is a spectrum, not a binary where you can either be a racist or an angel.
You've defined racist as a person who feels prejudice against people of other races. You then assert inside prejudice is bias, and follow by asserting, we all have racial biases. You then ask a rhetorical question, is having racial bias the same thing as being a racist? The logical answer is, of course not. You say this, but then you assert racism is a spectrum and not a binary. With this, you've asserted that everyone is a racist, but to varying degrees. Am I the only one who thinks this is intellectually dishonest? Because everyone has racial biases, everyone is racist, but to varying degrees. While prejudice requires bias, bias does not require prejudice. This is not a one equals the other scenario. There are many degrees of racism and many ways it can take form, but they are all a conscious choice. You don't accidentally become a racist, much in the same way you don't accidentally become a prostitute. But here, through your arguments and assertions, you've concluded that everyone is a racist.
The Implicit Association Test, or IAT, was a test developed by Harvard researchers to examine correlations between certain attributes like good, bad, fun, evil, and targets like black, white, gay, or straight. When I took the test, I showed less racial bias towards any one group, probably because I had a very diverse upbringing with friends and family from all walks of life. That puts me a little bit lower on our racism spectrum.
So the I'm more equal than you argument. Everyone is racist, but I'm less of a racist than any of you. Also, the IAT is not one single test, it's a whole battery of tests. And I strongly disagree with the whole test wording, there's no correct or incorrect answer here. Here's a list of available tests. Since you don't specify what test you're referring to, I could just stop here. However, you're likely referring to the race IAT, so I'll go from there. The test is described as, this IAT requires the ability to distinguish faces of European and African origin. It indicates that most Americans have an automatic preference for white over black. This is not prejudice as you've previously claimed. Bias is not racism, no matter how hard you try to twist the definitions and terms.
I did have a little bit of racial bias favoring people of African descent, which makes sense because I was raised by people of African descent and spent the most time with them.
Oh, man.
So yes, it's possible to have racial biases no matter how woke you are or how much you love The Wire.
I don't watch The Wire. I also don't use woke. Having a diverse group of friends is fantastic. But this is the same group of people that harps on cultural appropriation and token friends.
Racial biases can happen both ways. So, the IAT isn't the end-all be-all whether you're racist or not. But if you're like, man, according to this test, I might be a racist, start by diversifying your friend group.
You've conflated prejudice with bias yet again. Having bias does not equate to prejudice. By doing so, you're implying that everyone who has even the slightest bit of bias is being a racist.
The IAT isn't the end-all be-all whether you're racist or not. But if you're like, man, according to this test, I might be a racist, start by diversifying your friend group. Pick up a history book, talk to folks who aren't like you. It's never too late to unlearn prejudice, but you have to acknowledge that it exists first, fam.
I've got a lot of problems with this video. I know it's clickbait, but that doesn't excuse it from being inflammatory and incorrect. There's this constant smarmy, smug condescension and a facade of outrage when someone else is outraged. It's crafted to provoke a reaction and then trick you into feeling guilty for getting angry. He takes a definition for racism and then goes through multiple leaps in logic and word twisting to arrive at his conclusion. I had to watch this thing a dozen times to analyze what he was saying, and doing this job, it's actually rather hard. The unfortunate aspect is that he brings up several good arguments. We should have more diverse friends, social diversity helps learning, and humans have biases. However, it's coated in muck from the weaselly shifting of definitions and the moving of goalposts. He starts off with, all white people are racist, and ends with, everyone has racial bias, and considers this a victory. It just makes me mad that so many people fall for this garbage and defend these creators for making such divisive content. Mike isn't helping, it's hurting, and likely filling its wallet at the same time. Now, I've got cameras to check, so